Just to introduce myself, my name is Steve Howland. I'm the Managing Director of Quadrant Farming Solution, both in Australia and in New Zealand. We set up in New Zealand about 18 months ago, and we're firing over there already. William Scott, he's joined us today as a panellist, and he has been my consultant in using Zelit on farm now for well in excess of 4 years. He is very, very conversant with dairy cows generally because he's been a farmer himself, and he's also managing director of his own company called Cow Signals Australia. So he's here today to answer a number of and explain a number of technical aspects of using Zelit. And we're fortunate to have Lydia Whiting from Tasmania. She's just joined us as our marketing lady. She's the one responsible for setting everything up today and helping us understand how to use Zoom. So, Lydia, do you want to just explain a little bit as to how the Q&A session will work at the end?
Sure. Hi, everyone. During the presentation, if you do have any questions, there's a Q&A box down the bottom of your screen. Just type your question in there, and we'll take about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation just to answer some of those questions. If we don't happen to get to your question, we will get back to you after the presentation as well. Thanks, guys.
All right. Okay. So just a couple of some basic facts. We've been marketing as Zelit in Australia now for over 5 years. It took a while to get it going because it was a new concept and people had to get their head around how this thing worked. But since then, our sales growth across the nation in all states that have good dairy production has been in excess of 30-35% per annum and just keeps growing. At this stage, we estimate that we've got more than 100,000 cows on the product now and successfully enjoying the Zelit product in their transition strategies. As for stock, we hold stock in Brisbane warehouse. We hold it in a Melbourne warehouse and in Perth. So South Australia is serviced from Melbourne, and some of the New South Wales markets is serviced primarily from Brisbane because of proximity. I want to make the point that everything that we show you today is not opinion. It's not our opinion, our views. It's actually information that can be backed by all scientific research from the USA, Australia and New Zealand. We did quite a bit of work with Dairy New Zealand, and they've done 3 trials on the product, and they've yet to publish their results. But we've also got some good practical feedback from farms that are using the product, so that's also included in this presentation. So let's have a look at the agenda. I just got to... It freezes a little bit, so you might have to be just a little bit patient with me in getting this moving, if you don't mind. It sits there. There we go. Here's the agenda going now. All right. So what we'll talk about today is the critical importance of healthy calcium balance in cows. The effect of low calcium blood levels during transition. What's the health impact on the cow itself? And what are the economic costs to you and the farm? Critical issues that you need to be aware of that we have got our head around very much now on the traditional methods of management in regards to lead feed decad systems and flow packs. We'll talk to you a little bit about, we've got one slide on this, on safety of Zelit. I would recommend you stay right here with us right through this presentation because this information is very new, very relevant on improving your fertility, the fertility side, and how that's happening, and some of the critical measurement elements have just been revealed to us, and we're going to show them today. We're going to show you that there's more profit to your farm, and the reasons: you're going to use your own pasture, you're going to use less labour, and you're going to see that there's potential for more milk solids and obviously less disease. And we'll have a Q&A session and discussions, and we'd like your feedback as to what you're thinking, and anything on your mind, please ask us. Okay, so let's look at this. 80% of cow health problems occur within 4 weeks of calving. So the focus on transition period, there's 4 weeks before and 4 weeks after, is absolutely critical to get this right if you want to maintain a healthy herd. And it's a fact that it takes the same amount of time to nurse one milk fever cow as managing 30 healthy cows. So good transition cow management, according to the University of Minnesota, influences the health, the production, the pregnancy rate, and longevity of your herd. So this transition period is the most stressful period in a dairy cow's life. The animals are very, very vulnerable to disease because she's trying to maintain her own bodily functions. She's developing the calf and the colostrum. She's preparing herself for lactation. There's a whole lot of things going on in that animal. And so the key is maintaining healthy calcium blood levels. This is critical. It's important that there's good focus on adapting the rumen at the time. We want to avoid immune suppression, maximising colostrum quality and minimising disease. And William will extrapolate more information on that as we go along. And maximising feed intake is very, very important. The University of Minnesota states reducing the time spent in a negative energy balance by encouraging feed intake is underlined the most important goal of transition cow management. So that's a very, very important area. So the strategies for managing milk fever, subclinical hypocalcemia have been a little bit limited over the years for farmers. You can do nothing. This is going to increase your risk of milk fever and associated disorders. You blanket treat with IV, calcium drips, drenching, all that type of thing. The other one is the most popular method today in Australia is the negative DCAD diet, and we'll explain how that works and what are the impacts on the animal when you do that. But the idea there, it just induces a metabolic acidosis, mobilizing calcium from the bones into the bloodstream. Now, before DCAD came along, there was this concept of a low calcium diet where you really restrict the calcium intake in the feed to less than 20 grams a day. And this in itself limits the availability of calcium to the animal, and this mobilizes the calcium from the bones also. But that's so difficult, this less than 20 grams a day of calcium, because the feed, it's very, very hard to find feed with that level of calcium in it. And so what Zelit does, it's a new concept, and it is an alternative approach. And what this does, it basically mimics number 3. It binds calcium in the diet, and the calcium is naturally mobilized as we go along. Anyway, so that's the situation there. Do we need to be worrying about subclinical issues if milk fever rates are low? We get a lot of farmers say to us, oh yeah, but I don't have much milk fever. The question is, how much subclinical milk fever does your herd have? So for every one cow with a clinical case, it's known, and Dairy Australia states this, there's at least 8 cows with subclinical milk fever. So the clinical cases is purely the tip of the iceberg. And here we have the real issue that's costing farms, and that is the subclinical issues that you cannot see. So there could be up to 40% of the herd with subclinical milk fever. So if you look at a farm with 400 cows, and it's got roughly a 5% clinical downer cows, that's 20 cows. That means there's at least 160 of the animals have got subclinical, and they are vulnerable to metabolic diseases affecting profitability on the farm. So this is the situation. If you've got a poor transition system in your business. Milk fever, downer cows, it's caused by deficiency in calcium. 1 in 20 clinical cases will die, and the lifespan reduced by at least 3 years. And you can expect 15%, at least 15% lower milk production with downer cows. You've got an increased incidence of mastitis by 7, increased risk of retained membranes by 3, metritis by 4, lower milk production, left-placed abomasums 4, ketosis, at least 5 times the risk of ketosis, low magnesium, breast tetany, and you've got potentially fertility issues. Now, this information I'm putting in front of you now is from Journal of Dairy Science in the United States by Rodriguez, his research in 2017. So there's reduced immune and muscle function when the calcium levels go too low. Subclinical cows also are impacted, but not obviously by going down. So you can't see that the animal has got subclinical issues. So let's look at the importance of the calcium itself in the animal. Okay, it supports the skeletal muscle function. It's about muscle function there. That's why they go down. If it's compromised, the muscles, she goes down. It affects the function and the motility of the rumen. It affects the expulsion of the placenta. And, you know, even the teat sphincters contract because they're a muscle. And if these don't contract, bacteria can get in and you've got mastitis. So it's so important to keep her calcium levels at healthy levels. And so, Will, would you like to comment on the immune cell activation, how important that is?
Yeah, we have these antibodies called neutrophils. Now, neutrophils' job is basically to get to the point of infection quickly as possible, so to be able to knock the bacteria out once they've got into the body. Now, one of the things that they've discovered was if you have low blood calcium, basically you produce very poor quality neutrophils. And they describe this as non-sticky neutrophils. So they'll often go past the point of infection. So it takes a lot longer for them to get to the point of infection. So therefore, the bacteria has an advantage to be able to make that animal sick. So calcium is very critical in this whole immune system.
Okay, thanks, Will. Okay, let's look at the importance of calcium. What we're looking at right here is a 600 kilo close-up dry cow. Just to maintain maintenance, her body maintenance is she'll use 9 grams of calcium. She needs 8 grams for fetal skeletal growth and 12 for her development of colostrum. So 29% is absorbed. So before calving, her requirement in her bloodstream is only 25 to 30 grams a day. After calving, this is where it really is an issue, and her requirement of calcium jumps by more than 80% because of all the issues of developing the colostrum, getting ready for lactation, and so forth. So after calving, this sudden and rapid demand for calcium, this is important, cannot be met from the feed. So the question is, where does she get it from? And she can only get it from her bones. And she's currently got a reserve, she's roughly got a reserve between 7,000 and 9,000 grams of calcium in her bones. So this needs to be mobilized to keep her strong, to keep her healthy. So this is what it looks like in a graph form. So on the left, the axis on the left, this is your measurement of calcium in the bloodstream in millimoles per litre. And you can see on the yellow line, we really don't want her to go below 2.12 millimoles per litre. That's where she stays above that line, she stays strong and she stays well. But naturally, she will, because of this extra demand in calcium, she's going to go down under subclinical line if something's not done. And the last thing we want to see is for her to drop down below the red line and putting her into milk fever status. So if you look at the bottom axis there, you've got 18 days before calving, 13 days before calving, 8 before, 3, and then at calving, that's where her calcium levels are at the lowest. And then as you can see, she recovers as after calving. But we need to keep that above that line. The prevalence of hypocalcemia in dairy cows. Now, this is some research that was done in the United States, 1,400 cows from 480 dairy herds in the USA. You've got the lactation number along the bottom, and you've got the calcium in millimoles per litre on the left-hand side. Okay. So you can see the heifers, even 25% of heifers can go down into subclinical. But as they age, there's more risk and more prevalence of clinical milk fever and subclinical milk fever. So your older animals are really starting to get quite productive around that third year, and that's really where you want them to be, in peak lactation and contributing to the profitability of your farm. And the last thing you want is milk fever issues and subclinical milk fever issues.
Now, just one point on that. If those heifers, if 25% of the heifers are falling into a subclinical range, the question often gets asked, do I use transition feeding on heifers? And I think that sort of answers that question. Yes, if 25% of them are subclinical, it would pay to do a proper transition.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Okay, so clinical and subclinical milk fever is costly to your farm. And it's not about focusing just on the top. It's what's in the middle that really matters. So University of Minnesota state that low blood calcium correlates to the following: ketosis, higher somatic cell count, delayed uterine involution, causing reproduction issues, metritis, depressed feed intake, and reduced milk yield. And that's from the University in the USA. So let's look at a typical farm that's got, let me look, 400 cows. It's got 5% clinical and 40% subclinical. And these are the costs, metabolic costs apportioned by Dairy Australia. So here we have the clinical milk fever. If you've got 5% of the herd with clinical, that's costing you about $8,000 because it's $400 per case. Subclinical is about $125 per case, estimated. That's costing you $20,000. So you're looking at about $70 a cow over the entire herd of 400 cows because of those issues. Great opportunity to save money and add to the profitability of your farm if we get this right. And what's interesting, and we'll show you, that the typical average result of a farm, even using lead feed DCAD, in our estimation and also from research, can still experience this level of metabolic disease. Would you mind explaining this, how the DCAD, what the DCAD stands for, Will, this dietary cation?
Yes, so it's actually negative DCAD. Basically, what you're trying to do with this system is you are trying to acidify the blood so we can stimulate the parathyroid gland to produce parathyroid hormone. Okay, so you do this by adding negative ions into the feed. Now, these negative ions will attract the calcium and the phosphorus off the bones, and then they will then go through to the kidneys, because the kidneys wants to try and hold the cow's blood pH in the region of about 7.35 to 7.45. So they will take that calcium and phosphorus to neutralize that bloodstream again. So this is what the kidneys are doing the whole time. And in this process, calcium is randomly being stripped off the bones of the skeleton. Now, if you saw on that previous slide, Steve said there were 7,000 to 9,000 grams of calcium there. But not all of that can be mobilized. Otherwise, the cow wouldn't have a skeleton. So we've only got so much that can be mobilized. So this system can be a little bit of a problematic in the fact that if we are mining too much of these minerals out here, two things can happen. One, we can open the cow up to low or poor calcium balance in later lactations, and basically they get culled out of the herd because they'll have sluggish teat ends closing up there. They end up with mastitis and they get flicked out of the herd. So I think I don't think we need to make it more complicated than that. So basically, the next slide, Steve.
Yep.
It's in simple terms, it's actually an equation of positive ions versus negative ions, and we want to be on the negative side. Now, there's some problems in this because, and this is why ryegrass is a problem, because ryegrass is a very efficient feeder, and it picks up a lot of potassium. So you would know with a negative DCAD diet that you have to restrict your grass, because that potassium will normalize that blood pH. Now, this is a bit of an elephant in the room that people don't like to, and especially in Australia because it's a hot climate. potassium to a cow is exactly the same as salt is to us. It's the mineral they require to keep themselves cool. Now, if we're restricting that in their diet, this will cause extra heat stress on that animal. The other problem is these negative ions are very extremely bitter. So this is why it's quite difficult to get these cows to get sufficient intake in this. Okay, Steve. So basically what we're looking at is we're looking at a system where you've got a decad thing, formulation. We have to measure how much potassium's in the grass, in the hay, in the silage, and often what people forget is to check the water supply. Because we've seen this actually in Mount Gambier area and also in south of Perth. They've had problems with high calcium in the water supply. So this has just been neutralizing their decad effectiveness. Okay.
So the question is, do you know what the outcome is going to be? So we're not here rubbishing decad. It's been here for over 20 years. But what we are saying, these are some of the considerations to think about in using a decad system, okay? If you really want to get it right. It works if it's managed well. So to be confident, each different feed source should be tested for decad equation to be truly accurate. And you want to talk on the pH just briefly, Will?
Yeah, well, so basically you acidifying this thing. You're taking these cows down to, well, sometimes below 5.0. Obviously has health consequences, which we'll show you just now on another table.
Okay. Urine testing is important for true accuracy. Question is, those that are using lead feeds at the moment, how often are you testing for urine?
Okay, so this picture here is from a trial from the US, from Kansas, where they were looking at decad versus excellent. Excellent, there's the pH down the side there. The excellents are the green dots. With excellent, we're not trying to acidify the bloodstream. Okay, we are looking for a reaction that happens in the rumen, and excellent does not affect anything in the bloodstream. Does not affect pH in the bloodstream. Now, these red dots are the urine tests for the cows are on the negative decad. Now, the thing to look at, where you've got this yellow normal pH line, you notice there's 3 above it. So in other words, that decad diet is having no effect on those 3 animals. The ones that are below the 6 line, all those red dots below, they are being over-acidified. Now, when we over-acidify a cow, she will go off her feed. And this has often been associated, this is where we have this association between negative decad diets with over-acidification and LDH, because sometimes we're getting cows that stop eating, empty rumen, and then we have the LDA develop. So that's the other thing is to look at that variation across that, and that is in a very controlled environment. This trial was done.
Yeah. All good there, Viv? All good?
Yeah, just one more thing about the glutamine. What actually happens is these animals with this low pH, they are really trying to hammer the calcium and phosphorus out of the skeleton, okay, to try and neutralize that pH. So you are, in that case, you are overmining the skeleton. Okay.
So do you want to explain? So you got situation, if you got extreme decad, it's saying basically if you're feeding more anionic supplement, it's going to cost you more. And there's more work associated with monitoring the urine pH. Often you'll get unexplainable problems and it's as a result of extreme decad, but the farmer doesn't even know about it. And you've already said they consume less feed, but would you mind just expanding on that glutamine deficit? I think that's really important, Will.
So what actually happens is basically if you're too negative with your decad, you will actually mine all the bioavailable stuff from the skeleton out. Then the kidneys are really having a problem because they have to now turn to glutamine, to use glutamine as the buffer. pH. Is very important in economics because it is responsible for producing milk protein. So if you have a glutamine deficient cow, she's not going to produce a lot of milk protein.
Okay. So how extreme is the DCAD, your DCAD? So issues when considering using the DCAD method. Garrett Otzel, a well-known researcher in the University of Wisconsin, has researched and says that greater than 50% of second lactation cows, even using anionic salts, can have an incidence of subclinical milk fever. DCAD method requires the active and regular checks of pH. The DCAD diet should be customized really to individual farms and their ingredients to be really effective. You're going to manage it well. If you feed it, this is by, you want to comment on this Ian Lean's study?
Yes, basically what's happening here is if you feed DCAD for more than 28 days, basically these cows will, you would have mined up all the calcium and phosphorus out of the bones that were available, and basically they will probably develop milk fever because they are deficient in calcium and phosphorus.
Okay, that was from Ian Lean.
Yep.
DCAD salts, as you all know, are bitter and unpalatable and often is rejected, these pellets and so forth. The question is, are your cows actually getting what they need during that 21 days prior to calving? And so according to Charbonneau in 2006, that the intake of food can be reduced by up to 11%, dry matter intake with a DCAD. And you want to fully feed the cows. And you need to restrict that pasture and legumes, as we stated. So, summary. Will?
Okay, so they know that low diets, lower dry matter intake. Okay. High calcium approach that people are talking about, basically, this actually interferes with the parathyroid gland and the hormone. And basically, those cows, when you increase the calcium to that high rate, they actually drops their dry matter intake. Now, from a meta-analysis that was done by Dr. Ian Lane in the last couple of years, they discovered that heifers on negative DCAD diets produce less milk. In other words, 1.28 liters down per day. Yet the cows produce more milk at 1.1 liters a day. So you can work it out yourself. You know, what is the advantage? There's still an advantage in feeding negative DCAD, but it's not as great as people think it is. But you've got to remember that we've got to also transition those heifers, because we know that 25% of them could be going down could have subclinical hypercalcemia. And basically, this monitoring of urine pH is actually quite a critical thing, because you have to test these cows within a certain period of time after eating that diet, because the kidneys will be buffering that acid out of the bloodstream. So you've only got a certain period of time when you can test that urine pH. So generally what they do overseas is they will get a subgroup out of the transition cows. So a group of 10 cows that they bring in every day and they test within that period of time. So, you know, on large herds, you know, how accurate is it? Have you, which cows have you selected? Okay.
Okay. So here we see down a cow being treated with an IV. And it's unnecessary for cows with no clinical signs. So you can expand on this one, Will, please.
Okay, so what actually happens? This is what happens to a cow when you put an IV calcium oral glutamate drip into a cow. As you can see, we've got a cow goes down at the hours after treatment on the bottom line there. We've got a 0 there. The red line is the clinical milk fever line. Okay, you put it in there, and within possibly half an hour to an hour, that cow's blood calcium goes up to such a level as near cardiac arrest. And that's why you see people often using a stethoscope when they're doing an IV because they're listening to the heart rate, because they know that if you push it in too fast, you can actually kill the cow. But then what happens after about 5 hours, the cow goes back to that, back to the clinical milk fever line, and then it actually drops below it. Because what you've actually done, in effect, you actually have switched off the parathyroid gland from producing parathyroid hormone. Now, this has now put this animal into a subclinical hypercalcemia thing. Now, we'll explain to you later, these cows often will stay at this level for several days. So the question is, it's actually, they've discovered there's actually a negative effect, overall negative effect by using an IV. Yes, you've kept your cow alive, but generally she will have all these other problems from ketosis through to poor fertility later on. Now, the other thing is, the question is, in this case, what would actually be preferable? Because a lot of farmers say, well, the second day I'll go and put another drip in it and all that. Once your animal can swallow, you are better off to either use a bolus or to use a drench if she can swallow. So sometimes, as soon as you put that into that cow, maybe you shouldn't be using a full drip. If that cow can swallow, maybe you should be putting it orally down her throat is a far better effect, because it is much more gentle on absorption rate. We don't get these extremes. Okay.
So here we have a typical transition paddock using a DCAD system. The animals tend to be just walking around in either dirt or mud. The feed there is very, very low energy feed. And we're limiting the high potassium, calcium pastures and legume as a result. So we're saying that, so dirty cows, they're in the muddy calving area, but, the potential for disease. And the other thing too is how much of that feed that's brought in for the animals is actually wasted because they're walking on it, they're laying on it. We've read that you could be losing about between 30 and 40% of your feed as a result of the animals just laying on it and not eating it. So now we're going to talk about the excellent product. It's effective and it's simple. It's a new approach to transition feeding. So how does it work? We'll just play a little video for you.
Smart farmers around the world know that the welfare of their animals impacts their bottom line over both the short and long term. Zelit is a unique natural solution that was developed from years of research to eliminate the detrimental consequences of calcium deficiency. In the case of transitioning cows, the large amount of calcium they use to produce colostrum leaves them prone to calcium deficiency and milk fever. This can cause their muscle functions and immune system to weaken, bringing on a cascade of other problems that can be very costly in the long run. On average, 5 to 6% of cows will experience clinical hypocalcemia or milk fever. Showing clear symptoms, these cows require treatment with an IV calcium injection. Unfortunately, by this point, the cow has already lost a lot of its production capacity, and the negative impact of the low calcium level will follow her the entire lactation. Subclinical hypocalcemia, on the other hand, affects approximately 50% of dairy cows and is rarely diagnosed because there are seldom visible signs.
Left untreated, cows are susceptible to lower milk yields and a higher rate of metabolic diseases, all of which negatively impact productivity.
Zelit is a smart and effective way of preventing both full-blown milk fever and subclinical hypocalcemia. To use Zelit, simply add to the cow's feed during the last 2 weeks of the dry period. Zelit binds calcium from the feed, inhibiting calcium absorption and triggering the cow's natural hormonal system. This in turn activates her ability to mobilize calcium from her bones and maintain a sufficient calcium level at calving, at which time Zelit is simply removed from the feed. The results are impressive, with Zelit achieving 85% efficiency in practical farming environments without any negative side effects. We believe that Zelit offers the best solution for transitioning cows in both terms of productivity and animal welfare. Benefits include much smoother and faster calvings, lower rates of metabolic diseases, higher milk yields, a higher lifetime performance, and stronger bottom lines. Find your dealer and learn more at Zelit.com.
So let's look at this this chart here, and we'll go back to the Zelit formulation is specifically designed in pellet form or in a ration or however. You don't have to worry about the grass. You don't have to worry about the hay, silage, or water, because it's not an acidifying process. It's a binding process. And this is the beautiful thing about there's no need to formulate the balanced diet and test and also use home grown feed, which improves your profitability.
Steve, just one point on that, on that slide. Basically, there is one sort of area. Excellent. It reacts with the calcium in the rumen. The one thing we do have to be careful of is not to have excess calcium coming into that diet, like putting limestone into that transition diet, because if you overload.
Just got a bit of a freeze. Hopefully he'll come back on in a moment.
We probably want to avoid in that transition period.
You're freezing. You froze a little bit there, Will. I just wanted to make sure that you got that through. Okay. So here we have a very, very happy customer who's been using it for quite a few years here in Queensland. You can see that high potassium feeds can be transition friendly. And he's been using it for quite a few years and loving it. So I'll just go through the advantages of Zelit using pasture-fed cows. And Will, please stop me anywhere that you think you can add something to this. And so it's a natural process of mobilizing calcium before calving. It will only mobilize what's required to keep that blood level healthy. It's simple to use. You can adjust it to any feed system, TMR, fed in the dairy, however. It's very, very straightforward. You can add it to milk rations, and it facilitates the rumen adaptation, offering a lot of flexibility. Do you want to comment on that?
Just on that milker's ration, when we make a statement, add it to milker ration, what has been done on some farms is say that their milker ration was designed for 6 kgs for their milking. What we have done in the past is actually give those transition cows half that amount. So in other words, they're going to be getting half the calcium intake there. And that system can work like that because we're not overloading the calcium. That's not giving them the full 6 kgs. If you fed the full 6 kgs, we'd have too much calcium coming into the system and it would be ineffective.
Yeah. And so you got that
rumen adaptation there. Basically, it allows us to feed a very similar ration to the transition cows and very similar to the milking cow ration.
Okay. It is known, and we will show you examples where the colostrum quality is actually improved. We've had people say a lot of times that the incidence of mastitis on fresh cows is reduced. Cleaner calving environment, you don't have to restrict the pasture, no muddy paddocks, less mastitis, healthier calves. Reduced milk fever, clinical and subclinical, means higher peak lactations. The labour is an issue nowadays, very much. It's always been an issue, but I think it's becoming more of an issue. You can reduce your labour requirements in your transition products. That's good. Minimises feed wastage, and it's a neutral taste. You don't get any feed rejections or sorting with this product. And I'll show you the next video will show you some cows eating it. We put the little white specks in the grain mix is the actual Zelit. So just, this is a farm in Queensland. I was there that day and I just watched them. They emptied the entire trough. Would you like to just talk a little bit about the quality issues with colostrum, William?
Okay, this is a farmer down in South Gippsland, and she's a stud breeder, so she always, her calves are valuable to her, so she's always using a refractometer to do her readings on her colostrum, see the quality, and we just jotted down these figures when she was using a negative decat thing, and her average on the refractometer was 21.3, which you can see on that blue, on the graph there. The red line is obviously the ideal. The 22 is your target. You want to be above it. You can look at the bar on the graph. Basically tells you the range of where those animals were. She then went across and did excellent. And basically, this is her finding, that she found that all of those animals had a colostrum quality above 22. So this is quite an interesting thing. She did this on her own. And it actually is quite amazing that this is the case, because this is a really good indication of cow immunity. Then what happened is Cornell University did a trial there, and they found a couple of things. The graph on the left here is the volume of colostrum yield. Okay, the con is the control, and the EXP is the excellent. So we notice the excellent cows produce less volume of colostrum than the control. But then we go across to the right-hand graph there. And there's that line. It's obviously a different scale. In the States, it's 5,000. You can look at the quality of the colostrum, the red one being the excellent, and you can see it is much higher than the control.
So we'll get into the fertility now. This is very, very interesting stuff. And we're not all that far away from finishing this presentation, so please hang in there. Okay, Will.
Okay, so this is a trial done at Cornell. Okay, again, the excellent is the red line, and the blue line is the control. And this is what they found. So on first service, you can look at the first service conception there. Basically, they got a 60% conception with the excellent. The control only got 40%. Now, if we move it up to days, this is days in milk on the bottom there. We move up to about 150 days, only 10% of the excellent cows were still not in calf, whereas 30% of the control cows were not in calf. Okay, Steve? So now they also looked at the time to pregnancy. Okay, by the treatment, again, the excellent cows were 70 days versus 89 days. To get 50% of the herd pregnant. Okay, so we look at these things. It's considered for every day that you're not in calf is going to cost you between $5 and $7. So there's a 19-day difference. So it's 19 times 5 or 19 times 7. Now, this is the other thing they did in the trial is they went and they further analyzed the subclinical hypercalcemia animals, and they actually recategorized, they broke that group into two. Okay. Now, keep in mind what I said to you about the 4-in-1 drip. Basically, those cows in the yellow line, they had stayed in that subclinical area for more than 3 days after calving. Okay. What they discovered that only 40% of those animals became pregnant by 150 days. Whereas the other ones that were only temporarily subclinical hypercalcemia, 85% of them were pregnant by 150 days. And obviously the no subclinical, these are the cows that weren't affected by it at all. They were all pregnant by about 145 days. So that's telling you that calcium status has a direct effect on the fertility of your cows and later lactation. And that's why I come back to this thing with heifers. As dairy farmers, quite a lot of heifers get culled out of the herd because they don't get pregnant. This could be the reason.
Go, Will.
Okay. Reasons for improved fertility: good calcium balance improves digestion health. Well, obviously we get a better energy balance there as well. Better ruminations, better uterus health because we can expel the placenta out. Okay. Overall, less disease with mastitis, basically because we have good T10 sphincter closing, and we get better immune function because we produce better quality neutrophils.
Now, I'll just talk on the safety issue. It has been the Commission of European Communities amended its list of accepted additives using animal feed in 2004, allowing the synthetic zeolite to be used in reduction of milk fever. European Union dairy farmers offered a safe alternative to DCAD. The CEC formed the opinion over the years that the efficacy of zeolite, which is what this product is, was sound in reducing milk fever in dairy cows, no adverse side effects on the cow, calf, milk or food and the environment. And it won the Innovation Prize in France in 2014 and the top 10 new product at World Expo, Ag Expo in 2017.
But just on that note, you've got to realize that zeolites are actually used in the human food chain as well. So that's why these things are actually produced in a laboratory for to have different effects. We use it in coffee. That's what keeps the coffee granules apart, stops them connecting to each other.
Yeah. So
that's what zeolites are used in a lot of ways. So and the fact is, we've seen some people make comments that because it's sodium aluminium silicate, which is actually the same as a clay particle. That's what it is when it comes into the cup. It then reacts with the calcium and becomes a calcium product, which they actually use in horticulture. So it doesn't have any negative effect after it's passed through that cow. Basically, it's just the same as a clay particle in the paddock once it's passed through. And it's not entering the bloodstream. So some people made some crazy ideas that your cow's all going to develop dementia and not know where the dairy is. None of that is possible.
Okay, next. I said this is just a bit of Australian research that we did, and I'll get you to speak through this one too, Will. This is a robotic dairy farm in the Lockyer Valley in Queensland. Yep.
Okay, so what happens? We did this trial as a proof of concept. Okay, so this was a 180 cow herd. We split them. They were produced over 10,000 litres. We matched the cows up according to lactation, milk production, age. All of these things were put in there to get the two groups to be as equal as possible. This is a free movement robot farm. The cows could go and get feed anytime they want. They could walk into the robot anytime they want. So it was just free traffic. Okay. And they were housed in the compost farm. And then basically we had this dashboard of we were recording all of the stuff from these cows for up to 82 days into lactation. Okay. So, yeah. So what we had, this particular farm didn't have a milk fever problem. They were feeding a negative DCAD product from the States, which is called Biochlor. The dosage rate of that is 750 grams a cow a day and a duration of 3 weeks. Versus we were using Exlet for 2 weeks with a dose rate of 500 grams.
Okay, yep. You there, Will?
Okay. Yeah. So what we did is we took blood samples from these cows from early on in the transition all the way through to calving, which is the day 0 there. Okay. And then we took it up to 3 days afterwards. The Exlet line is the blue line and the Biochlor line is the red one. There we have the subclinical line there. You can see some of the Biochlor cows did drop below into the subclinical area, but not necessarily for a long enough time to be a problem, whereas none of the Exlet cows went into that area. Okay.
Magnesium?
Magnesium. we saw that the Xlet did react a little bit with the magnesium, but not to any negative effect. And the same thing with the Bichlor. We generally do feed cows extra magnesium in diets because sometimes it's deficient in pastures.
Yeah. You're recommending.
Yes, it enhances.
Sorry, Will.
Yes, it enhances the parathyroid hormone, that reaction with the gland. It just magnifies it. It makes it much more efficient.
Okay, so we're using magnesium oxide or sulfate?
No, magnesium oxide. So we don't want any palatability problems. We don't want anything affecting intakes.
Okay.
Okay. Now this is a very interesting thing, and it's something that's coming out now from the States on a trial, and they actually have realized that phosphorus is possibly more important than calcium in this transition period, because they've discovered if your phosphorus is too high, it doesn't really matter what the calcium thing is doing. You can still end up with a milk fever. So this was the interesting thing, is that Zelit dropped that phosphorus level right down low. And this is possibly why they're thinking that you might have had a far better overall effect, whereas the negative decad diet that had virtually no effect on the phosphorus. And maybe this is where it loses some of its efficacy, because it's not reacting with the phosphorus, not affecting the phosphorus.
Yeah.
Okay, then again, this is the Zelit cows produced an extra 328 litres of milk in 82 days over the Bichlor cows. Milk solids, they produced in that 82 days an extra 11.5 kgs of milk solids. So I mean, you can look at that and put that into money terms, what you get paid. So if we compared the milk yield, the Bichlor cows produced on average 35 litres versus the Zelit cows produced 39.6 litres. Milk solids 2.49 versus 2.63. Now, the other thing that we found out, because we had collars on these cows, we found that the Zelit cows had a far higher rumination rate. Now, this could explain a lot of things. If we get a higher rumination rate, we're going to have, the cows are going to be taking a lot more saliva down into the rumen, which is going to buffer the rumen. So we might end up with a slightly healthier rumen. Okay. The Zelit cows went to the robots more often than the decad cows. So maybe this is because they had extra milk on board, or maybe they felt healthier, so they were more energetic. There was no real, when it came to the heifers, there was no real difference in the milk yield with the heifers. Okay. If you go, that was all animals I told you about before, but if you go right across to the right-hand side, you can see the difference in the mature cows. That the Bichlor cows were 37.5 versus 42.9. So the Zelit had a real positive effect on second lactation and above cows. Whereas there was no real, it was just flatlining for the heifers.
Now it's all well and good to be talking about. It's all well and good to be talking about how the product works and all that type of thing. But let's talk about the economics. Now we're going to introduce you to one of our customers down in Tasmania. He's got a lovely farm just out of Hobart. Now he was using a decad system in 2016. He had about 400 cows at the time. And 2017, he went over to Zelit and he had about 450 cows. You can see there his milk fever dropped dramatically. This is from him. We've got a video testimonial from this man you can have a look at later. His subclinical rates dropped from 360 to 8. That's based on the multiple effect that we've already talked about. His total metabolic cost was costing him about 116,000, nearly 117. And his overall cost with using Zelit went to about 23,000. This is from him. His cost of feed, if we just look at the cost of feed, it was paying more for the Zelit product, and this is what you're going to get. Yeah, per ton, the Zelit's this and decad's that and all that, but you've got to look at the payback that you get by paying a bit more for a product. So he had a net gain in his farm of about 90,000. And this man loves the product, will not stop using the product. He actually puts it into a pellet form. Now, you can actually do your own calculation on your own farm by going to the exlet.com.au and there's a calculator. You literally just follow the buttons and click the Exlet dollar return calculator, and you can put your own numbers in. How many cows you got, all the issues that you've experienced, and you can calculate the economic impact on your personal farm by putting in these numbers. And we're happy to talk to you through that calculator after this webinar if you're interested to be shown around how to use that calculator and work on your farm specifically.
On this calculator, when they worked this out in Europe, what they did, they had to obviously make some assumptions, but all the assumptions in this calculator are made on all the research work, what actually happened on different research trials. So there must be probably close on nearly 40 trials that have been done on Exlet worldwide. So all of these assumptions that go into that program have come from those trials. They're not just made up. You can actually, when you go into the calculator, you can go in and it actually shows you the scientific papers that these things are based off. Now, if one of the things is, if Lydia's got your email addresses, she could probably email that link to you directly to the calculator.
Okay, thanks, Will. So these are the testimonials. We won't spend time on these, but we're happy to share these testimonials. There's 3 farmers on pasture farms in Tasmania with really good videos and testimonials from the farmer themselves about using Exlet on their farm. And so we're at the thank you and questions and comments, please. We're finished. So let's go to the Q&A section, Lydia.
Okay, so we have already got a few questions from Becky. She's asked some really important questions. If anybody else wants to ask anything, just pop it in the Q&A box at the bottom. I'll just go through a few of Becky's questions first. Well, we've probably covered this. She's asked, how does it taste to the cow? So there is no palatability issues. The cow really doesn't know it's in there. So you can mix it with your grain or in with your mixer wagon mix and they won't know it's there basically. Another question is, can it withstand the heat used during the pelletization process?
Yes.
So yeah, if Becky wants to get it mixed in with her pellet, is the heat going to affect the product?
Okay, just the other thing on that point of making up a pellet or something like that, we are there. If you need a recipe or something like that, contact us. We can help you with your stock feed companies. Several stock feed companies are putting it into pellets already. So it obviously depends where you are in the country. But
do you see any problems with heat affecting the pellet, the Exlet pellet at all?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. It's that's why it's such a stable product. It stores for years. It's a very stable product. It doesn't pick up moisture or do anything, anything like that. So it's not something that's highly reactive with the atmosphere or with the pelleting process.
Another important question. So what happens if I fed it to my milking cows, and how serious are the effects if I did?
Yes, you will get milk fever. You feed your milking cows, they will develop milk fever because what it does, it will bind the calcium in the diet, and the cow will go down with it. So this is something that we sort of warn people: if you're going to use a mixing wagon to feed it out, make sure the mixing wagon has been emptied out completely, so there's no Exlet left in the bottom of the mixing wagon. If you're going to do that.
Will, I have a question. I wonder if you'd expand on it. It's in regards to your experience with the University of Queensland, where they found cows going down using Exlet. What happened?
Okay, so basically what they were using a negative decad diet first. And they were getting very, very poor results. They were getting a lot of milk fever that seemed to have no effect on it all. So anyway, they said, look, let's try this Exlet. So we put the Exlet in there and we got 100% milk fevers. Every single cow went down with milk fever. So then we went back and we said, well, what is going on here? So we went and looked and asked him and said, what's the story with your heifers growing to the right weight? And we looked at these heifers, and they were short, fat heifers. Yes, they were reaching the weight, but they had very short bones on them. And what we discovered that basically these animals had insufficient calcium and phosphorus right the way through their lives, and they didn't have virtually no lime or phosphorus in their milker's ration. So basically, it comes back to this: how much available calcium and phosphorus there is in the skeleton. These things had no reserves. So as soon as we put the Zelit in there, any calcium that was in that feed, it knocked it out. These cows had no calcium to draw off because it wasn't in their skeletons anymore. Now, we've seen a similar process with cows that are fed brassicas, because brassicas are very, very poor on calcium and phosphorus. So you really want to be able to feed your dry cows a bit of calcium and phosphorus during that dry period, because this is what you build. This is how you build up these reserves. Because we see exactly the same thing we see with negative decay. Now, if you don't rebuild those reserves up, you will have problems on the next lactation. So that, either which way you go, you're going to still have that same effect. So what we did at the university, we just pushed up the lime levels into the lactating cows and into the young stock, and the problem has resolved itself totally. There's no longer any problem. They no longer have any milk fever. Yeah. So those are sort of things. And the same thing can be said for those people feeding their transition cows high calcium diets, like feeding lucerne or adding extra calcium into those diets. It actually will backfire on you, because we know exactly how much calcium Zelit will actually bind with. We know that. We can actually calculate. And that's why I say, if you need some help with rations or asking questions, please feel free to approach us on an individual basis, and we can help you through those things and troubleshoot them. If the Zelit's not working well, please contact us so we can troubleshoot it.
Thanks,
another important question, guys. This is one I think we get a lot. Does it bind up other minerals or elements?
No, there's in the calculator, you'll find there's some research papers in there where they tested this, and they look for things like zinc and copper and all these things to get binding with. No, it doesn't. The whole success of the zeolite is it's actually designed to react with calcium and phosphorus. That's what it's designed to do. So when you make it a zeolite, it's made in a chamber that's got heat and pressure, and it gives it certain characteristics. So its valency, it reacts with the valency of calcium and phosphorus, because they're going to be more reactive. And that same thing applies in the soil. Calcium and phosphorus are far more reactive in the soil than, say, zinc or copper or any of those things are. So no, it has no effect on them at all.
So we do recommend that they just boost the magnesium oxide, because there is a little bit of binding goes on there, doesn't it, Will?
Yeah, very, very minor, but it's more. It's even on negative decay diets, we would recommend using a magnesium oxide in there, because it just magnifies the approach. It magnifies the reaction of getting that parathyroid hormone to release that, get that hormone released, and get it active. It actually can speed up the process, makes it more efficient.
Thanks, Will.
Okay, another one, guys. How has it been calculated how much Zelit they need? For example, would it depend on how much calcium they're absorbing?
Yes, to a certain extent. So basically, we want to make sure we've got about between 25 and 30 grams going in through the feed to that cow, because that's what she needs for her maintenance, produce colostrum and develop the fetus. Okay. We also know that maximum dose per cow per day is 500 grams. Okay. We don't want to go above it, because otherwise what happens is we lock up too much calcium, and basically you will stop the rumen, because that calcium is required for the rumen to work and for all the muscles to contract and all that. So we don't want to go above the 500. If we go and looked at a ration and we could produce a fairly low calcium ration, we could probably reduce the dosage rate back to about 400 grams. Now, we've done this on one farm in Tasmania where they are basically on beach sand. So we don't have a lot of calcium coming in via the feed. So the challenge is not that great there, and we were able to reduce it reduce the dosage rate back a bit. But then saying that that particular person now has turned around and said, no, he feels far safer just sticking with the 500 grams. So yes, you can play around with a little bit. I wouldn't be going below the 400 grams because there's too many. You start to come into an area where there's too many chances that something else could affect it. Like animals might get to some other feed, or feeds have different calcium levels and all of that in there. So that's why they work with our 500 grams. Feeding more than 500 grams, you will start running into trouble because the will start closing down the rumen and all bodily functions in the animal.
Great. So another one, guys. What diet should they be on when using Zelit, and how long do you feed it?
Okay, so basically this stimulation of the parathyroid gland can take anywhere from the region of about 7 to 10 days is sort of area that it would react to. Okay, some cows are fast. All cows are individual, so all cows will behave slightly differently to it. All the original trial work was done on 10 days, but generally we say 14 days is just a safe bet because cows can calve anywhere within it. They can calve 10 days early or 10 days late. Okay, so that's basically why 14 days was picked for that reason. Sorry, and the next part of the question?
So what diet should they be on while using Zelit?
So basically we want a diet that's going to be very similar to their milking diet. In other words, the same grains, probably the same protein meal, because all the same systems require. We want protein meal in that transition thing. So whether it's canola meal or cottonseed meal or whatever, the same grain that you're feeding your milking cows, you'd ideally want to use. The only thing going to drop out of that system is you're going to drop out the lime. Okay. Basically, you can want to chuck in probably about 6 or 7 kgs dry matter of your pasture or your silage or your hay, because this is one of the special things about this product. We can actually utilize the most energy-dense feed on that farm. Now, the more energy you get into that cow, the better she's going to calve and the healthier she's going to be. She's going to push that calf out. Her muscles are good. She's going to push that calf out quickly. If you push a calf out quickly, basically you end up with a healthy calf, okay? Because it's not stuck in the birth canal and breathing in fluid and things like that. So you get it out quickly. You get better quality colostrum, so that calf benefits from the better immune status of that cow. So it's a winner all the way around if you increase that density of energy into that animal's diet. And the same thing, another thing, we want the same things we do with negative decay things. We want to also get enough fiber in there to cause the rumens to get the rumen stretch. So we're giving the cow the ability to be able to eat more day one after calving. So all of those things, and obviously the bacterial adaptations. That's why I say we want the same feed we're going to feed the milkers. Basically, we want that very close to that, so those bacterial populations get set up.
I think one last question there. So what effect does it have on dry matter intake pre-calving?
Well, we got one farm that we've got a very big farm that we've got a lot of figures on. They were feeding an American negative decay diet. When they put them onto Zelit, their dry matter intake went up by 4 kilos. So basically, if it's fed at the right rate, no, it shouldn't affect it. But the other interesting thing is you can change that dry matter intake by feeding energy dense feeds. So in that case, you will increase your dry matter intake because you will have more digestible feeds that will have a quicker passage rate through the cow. So your dry matter intake, if you've got the right feed, will probably go up, not down.
Great. That's about all we've got at the moment, guys. If anyone does have any questions that they'd like to ask after the webinar, just flick us an email or give us a call.
Yes. Well, thanks, Will. Thank you, Lydia, and thank you, participants. We really appreciate that. Actually, it looks to me like everybody has sat through the entire presentation and hasn't dropped out. So obviously it was informative enough. And we are available anytime. Phone call me, call Lydia or whatever you want. And we're happy to help you if you want to start using Zelit on your farm. But
That's
thank
probably
you
a good
again.
thing to mention too, Steve, is that we
Yeah.
do offer full product and nutritional support.
That's correct. That's correct. So it's not just a case of sending product to you and hoping it works. We will talk you through exactly how to use it on your farm specifically, no matter what size farm we're talking about. So again, thank you very much, everyone. And this is being recorded. So if anybody wants a copy of the recording, they can ask us for it. But also, I blocked out the testimonial videos because it would have taken too long in the whole presentation. So these testimonial videos are available to you, and we're happy to send you the link. Okay, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Right.
Good
Thanks,
luck.
guys.
Bye-bye.